Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the News Behind the News with Ralph Cantava on Mix 94.7 FM. I hope that you guys had a great weekend. This afternoon, I'm glad to have the gentleman who's here in front of me, and that is the Deputy Governor and Attorney Reynold Groeneveldt. Good afternoon to you, sir, and thanks for being on the program.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cantav. Thank you for having me.
Great. It's glad to have you. You're no stranger in the sense that I've frequently, I've had some discussions with you.
Yes, indeed.
I can remember, I think, all the way back in 2015 when I was out doing my starting to do my interviews, meeting at your office, and so we're taking it up a notch, basically.
Yep. All right.
So something interesting that I read, actually, before we get into our topic for today, is that you ran for politics in 1979.
Yes.
With the UPDG?
Yes, with the UPDG. That was a group that had split off from the DP, and they were calling us the Young Democrats. The late Joseph Richardson was the leader at the time, and just before elections, he decided not to continue with the UPDG, and he went back to the DP. So that is the story of that. We were not elected. We were a group of young individuals.
Yeah,
but indeed, I was on that list.
Gotcha. And how was that experience? Because it was you, Don Hughes, Chester York, Raphael Boseman, and Raymond Marlin.
Ramon Marlin. Yeah, a group of young professionals, I would say.
Okay, interesting. Well, history tends to repeat itself. Recently, we currently have at least that party was elected, a group of young professionals. So you see, the usual transitions of politics. Politics is politics,
Yes, it is.
As time progresses, nonetheless. Okay, so that's interesting. I mean, I didn't know that when I read that. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, because I know you were in education, then you went into law.
Yes, so. At that time, I was just back from studying, and I was at the school. I taught 1 year at the Orania School, and then I started giving advice to the government, in particular Joseph Richardson, who was the Commissioner of Education at the time. Then he moved me to the Department of Education, and then in our discussions, and at that time I had this particular insight that I could have almost accurately project and predict the outcome of the elections, not only here but also in Curacao and Aruba at the time. So he said, you seem to have a lot of insight and knowledge, so I want you in my circle. So that's how I got involved with him, with the party at the time, and then he split away, and then he went back to the party.
Yeah, and then you never went back in politics?
No, I didn't go back in politics, yeah. My family and my sisters told me, my mother said that she doesn't want me in politics. She never told me that directly, but my family said that. So I said, well, okay, I will stay on the side and give my advice, give my opinions.
Yeah, but even still, you still contributed because you eventually, as you mentioned, you went into the Department of Education.
Yeah.
And what was that period like before you switched over to law? Some of the things you worked on, what would you say you're most proud of?
There was a small office consisting, I think, of 2 persons. The late Mr. Marvin Scott was the head of the department at that time, and I was placed at the department. And as I said, I used to give a lot of advice to the commissioner about education, about developing education. I recall one time Mr. Richardson told me, he said, I want you in the department because if I put you in the classroom, you only reaching about 30 children, but in the department, you can do more. And after I took over the leadership, the directorship of the department, we worked on a number of issues. For instance, the scholarship the scholarship policy and the whole structure as it is now. We set that up. We also had structured a school guidance team where we had professionals guiding teachers and guiding the schools on arithmetic, reading, languages, etc. We also created the ASCD. The ASCD, the local chapter of the ASCD then. The ASCD is an American Association for Curriculum Development.
Gotcha.
So we created a local chapter, and every year there would be a huge conference in the United States where all different kind of educational topics would be handled. So we would go with a delegation of teachers, sometime 20, 25, with the assignment that every teacher would follow certain workshops. And when they returned to St. Maarten, they would give those workshops to train the other teachers who were not able to travel. Mrs. Josiane Fleming and myself, she introduced me to the ASCD, and then we set it up. And St. Maarten became the first international chapter because it was basically for American schools and so forth. And Holland, I remember, was in the race, and we were able to get admitted before Holland. And then they asked us how you did that. But that was a period, I think, that we also held at that time the first Teachers Congress. We also set up professional association, like a teachers association to represent teachers and so. So at that time, we did a lot of work in education.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, I appreciate that response. And so, as deputy governor, your main work is now, you're an attorney. But does that affect your workload in any way?
Not really. My function becomes active when the governor is away. So if he is on vacation or he goes on a trip, or if he is, God forbid, not well, he's not feeling well a day, then he will let me know, and I would go into the office and do the work that he usually would do, or attend the ceremonies that he would attend. So it's more like support to the governor and assistance. Apart from that, I do my legal work as a lawyer. Of course, I have to keep abreast of what's happening, in government, locally, also in the Netherlands, also internationally, so that when I'm called upon to serve and go to the office, I'm aware of what is going on. The only way it affects my work is that cases where the government is involved, for instance, someone would come to me and say, my immigration request was turned down, could you handle that for me? And I have to decline. I have to refer them to someone else, because if I would handle a case like that, then eventually I might have to take the Minister of Justice to court. And I cannot do that, because technically the governor is the head of state. And in a sense like that, I would be, as deputy governor, taking the government to courts, and that would be unethical and undesirable. So I cannot do those cases. And I was told by the governor, Frits Goteneveldt, because before my appointment in 2010, I used to do a lot of cases for civil servants, where we were challenged, they didn't get a promotion, or they were dismissed, or they were wrongly treated. And I would do those cases, and I must say quite successfully. And then when I was appointed the Governor General at that time in Curacao, he called me and he said, Mr. Groeneveldt, I understand that you do a lot of cases against government, but that is over. You have to stop with that now. You cannot continue with that. So I say, yes, Your Excellency, I realize that. So since that, I cannot be involved in those type of cases anymore.
Gotcha. But so even in the case of a labor dispute in a private sector, that is fine then?
That is fine. Okay. Those I do. I do a lot of divorce cases, family cases. Okay. And recently I've been doing a lot of real estate cases. And recently I had an interview with Mr. Oral Gibbs, and we spoke a bit about that. And that is basically what the most cases that I'm handling now, assisting people to get their property divided.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the things I was just about to hop into, because I listened to the interview. And of course, months back when we spoke, you mentioned that is an area you recognize. It's pretty interesting, at least, as a practicing lawyer. And one of the things so I'd definitely like to get into, what I know you've shared consistently, is in us also developing our, local law, lawyers, basically. Mm-hmm. But so to start off with the, succession land and real estate, I guess how do you approach cases and, where you have disputes? Because is there any workaround at all, especially when it comes to if one is not able to reach out to family members to officially, divide a property?
Yeah. Well, the basic principle of the law is that all the heirs that are involved in the matter have to be involved in the division or in a case. So if all the heirs sit and make an agreement and sign it how they want to divide the property, then the notary can proceed and do the division according to that agreement. But if you have one individual or one heir who doesn't want to cooperate, then the notary cannot proceed, cannot do anything. I think it was in 2015 or 2013, a provision was made in the law, because that would mean if all the heirs do not agree, then the property would remain undivided. And the legislator realized that, so in 2013, they made an amendment to the law to make it possible that via the courts can be done. Also, there's an article in the Civil Code that says that no one could be obliged to remain in an undivided succession.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that gives the courts an opening. If one party or more parties do not want to agree or do not want to cooperate or refuse to appear at the notary to sign the deeds, then there's a possibility that via the courts that could be overruled. And then the courts would either appoint a bailiff to sign on behalf of the person or the persons who are refusing to sign. Or also recently, a couple of years ago, it has become possible now that the judge can determine that the judgment can be written in at the cadastre to transfer the ownership of the property, or that the judgment would serve in the place of the signatures of the persons who refuse to sign. So there are openings that you can proceed to get the property divided, although all parties are not 100% cooperating.
Yeah, because one of the things I remember you mentioning is the fact that there was even, because of course there are people who spend a little over a decade, up to 20 years, etc., with this issue. But you mentioned, I guess, something is maybe alarming of a case where it took over 60 years.
Yeah, and that case is still ongoing. Still not resolved.
Well, so what conclusions have you gotten out of this in terms of, I guess, maybe coming up with because I know you write, and you're someone who documents, perhaps putting out something that could assist persons while they're living, to start the process of getting things right, so that later on, if family members don't end up in these disputes, basically.
Yeah. Someone, perhaps I can call his name, Mr. Terence Ray. He called me recently and he asked me to produce an article about this topic,
Okay.
so that it can be published, and that I believe would assist persons, that they get an idea, if they have these type of problems, what could be done to have the problem resolved. So I'm going to do that. I promised him that I will do that within short.
Okay. So look forward to reading that then.
Yeah.
As far as successes, in getting this signed, sealed, and done, what was that like for you? And what do you see? Like, you have a lot of cases to get this done, or minimal amount?
It's growing. I have several cases, and since that interview with Mr. Oral Gibbs, I'm being approached more often by other groups and other families to have to look into their problems and see how we can have that resolved.
Okay. So what should with a family that have this issue, what should they consider before approaching a lawyer? What would you say?
Well, they have to get all the relevant documents. For instance, most of the time, the property was owned by a grandfather, and he died. And then they have to start by seeing if he left a will, if he was married in community of goods, if the wife also left a will, and then determine via the census office or via a declaration of inheritance from the notary who are the heirs. And then you have to look again and see if all the heirs can be located, if all the heirs are still alive, those that have passed on, if they had children, if they left a will. So it's a whole procedure and research that have to be done. And to determine if a will was left or not, we still have to check with an office in Curacao, the central registration for wills, and they would give a statement. Yes, this person left the will, it was registered on that date, this is the number, or no, the person did not leave a will. And that is a formality that you have to go through, because sometimes people would say, no, I know my father didn't leave a will, but the courts will not accept that, or the notary will not accept that, because you don't know for sure. Or sometimes the person left a will, he made a will in, let's say, 1970, and then in 75, he went back and make another will. So the will in 75 would supersede and annul the previous will. So you have to make sure that that was the last will that was registered. If he made a will in 75 and it was not registered, then it's not valid. So the last will that is registered with the central registration department, that's the will that is valid, that has to be used.
Yeah. So you shared something there which, of course, emphasizes the impact still felt with formerly being part of Netherlands Antilles, with the registry in Curacao.
Yeah.
Do you know of any attempt to finalize transfer of all those information to St. Martin? Or
some years ago, I requested the Prime Minister at the time to start that process, but apparently it has not been done.
Yeah, and then,
because we should have our own department register set up here, and all that is registered in Curacao should be transferred to us.
Yeah.
Because it could be quite cumbersome to get those statements. It takes some time, a while.
Yeah, because you're digging through.
Because St. Martin, so it's not a priority.
And is that
people have to
that
travel
digitized?
and have to travel and go to or pay someone to go down and go after
It incurs a lot of fees.
Yeah.
It helps to have it home, and then to, you provide that in itself is job creation as far as because you need meticulous people. Yeah, you need meticulous persons. To be part of that archival. Definitely. So also with what you just said, in the case of the full research, full background being done, but there's no will. What happens from there?
If there's no will, then the property is will have to be divided according to the law, and then the law states who are the heirs, how the property should be divided, and so forth.
Okay.
So then you follow that. If there's a will, you go according to the will.
So just for clarity's sake, then there is no, I don't know how to put it, it's probably limitation of, let's say you have a family, and you have a majority who wants to divide and develop a property, but a minority refuses to. Is there any limitation set, like you can only have a property undivided or underdeveloped or undeveloped for, let's say, maybe 30 years until, No,
there's no restriction or limitation concerning that. So if the family decide they're not going to divide it, or they can't agree to divide it,
it will remain.
It remains like that, then they remain joint owners. All of them own for an equal portion. They are owners of the property, and it's registered like that at the cadastre. You get a title search with all the names, and each for 1/4 or 1/5 or 1/6 or whatever.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that really emphasizes the need to get those things done while we are alive and breathing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It makes it easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you passed on, and especially if you don't have matters properly regulated, then it could cause some problems. Yes.
Yeah. No, I like that. It's interesting that you've really taken this up, because it is a issue we face on both sides of the island.
Yep.
And again, so as someone who likes to do research, it's complex, and you can imagine the emotions and stuff involved with the families. But and from a professional standpoint, I guess it challenges you to really work your muscles and do a lot of digging.
Yeah.
In that process.
Yes, it plays on both sides of the island. I have been following, but at a distance, the problem with the Webster and the Bobatui family. On the French side, I don't have all the details, but still I have a lot of questions, because when I hear property is going to be auctioned, then that would mean to me that there is a debt, that the owners of the property now owe someone a certain amount of money, and they are not paying. So that's why the property is going to be auctioned, but that was never explained. My family have a large portion of property in Grand Cars, so I'm involved also there with the family to have that divided. My grandfather bought it in 1905, if I'm not mistaken, 1905 or 1902.
Wow.
It's referred to, I think everybody know Riley Hill. So it's when you go down the Riley Hill by the fire station, the property behind that, and it goes right up to the top of the hill. So it's and we have problems with people who are on the land, who are making subdivisions. Someone who own part of the property. So I'm busy with the family also, trying to resolve those issues, and we have kept a number of meetings, and this was so nice and beautiful, where I set up a meeting here in Colby at Carl & Sons, and then we have the family members. Some are in New York, some are in Paris, some are in Texas, some are in Amsterdam, some are in the other places in the Netherlands, and they come in on Zoom, And we have so it's a family get together, and we discussing family business at the same time.
Yeah,
that is so beautiful.
Important. That's important.
Yeah.
Because we have to get past the intimidation phase of wanting to talk about death and
and everybody get to see each other, talk to each other.
Yeah.
And I know I have, for instance, I have a cousin in Holland. I haven't seen him in about 20 years, but I see him on Zoom.
Yeah.
And it's
those memories and stuff.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So one of the things you mentioned in that interview as well is, I think it was that interview, because you did one also with Mr. Moore. But in one of them, you mentioned that as far as land tax is concerned, because of the issue where we have that succession problem, it is also I
think it's difficult to introduce land tax.
But in the case of areas that are developed, would it still make sense to have a land tax? Because I guess that is, when a question like that is brought up, like for example last year, I think the CFT mentioned it in their review of different areas that St. Maarten can gain income. It definitely met a lot of resistance. So I guess I'm asking what consideration is there to either for St. Maarten to make this null and void, if possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's something I know that has been proposed on a number of occasions, but it has never reached to, I think, the floor of Parliament for debate or a concrete proposal. But I think it's an area that the country can generate some income, especially, as I said during that interview, on parcels of land that are generating, an income. For instance, if you have a hotel property and you are making profit, you own the land or a corporation own the land, I believe that profit should be taxed. Part of that money should go to the coffers of government, so that can assist with the development and the social needs of the country.
Gotcha. So with that, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the News Behind the News with Ralph Contav on Mix 94.7 FM. I'm joined with Deputy Governor and Attorney Reynold Groeneveldt. This discussion is a very interesting one because you definitely... I'm adding it to my list of several things to look into because, land development is so crucial, for a nation. Land ties into your national identity. Mm-hmm. And as you see the makeup of landowners change, that also definitely touches on the cultural realities of a country. In short, I remember just a few weeks ago speaking to students at the St. Dominic School, talking about my experience while in Mac school. Sometimes we would miss the bus because we would go to Emilia Wilson Estate, pick pomserettes and berries and different stuff. And I was so surprised when a bunch of the students raised their hands and said they never had a pomseret. I was like, impossible.
Really? Wow.
But so as you see the changes that are taking place, even there, for example, which all the more, I think, is part of the reason why we see a lot of people more intent about acquiring land and the like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Recently, I was able to acquire some land for my daughter and two of her cousins.
Nice.
And one of her friends sent me a WhatsApp message and said, "Thank you, Mr. Groeneveldt, for making 3 young St. Martiners proud landowners." And that really touched me.
Yeah. Definitely.
I was so happy that I was able to do that. Yeah.
So my final question for you there is, I guess, what are some of the cases that you reference when you begin with the caseload you have right now? Are there many successful cases of solving division issues in the past, and or is it in a sense fresh, based on our the legal proceedings happening now?
Yeah. No, I have several cases that I have been able to resolve. with land issues, and just lately more and more, and it was also my decision to concentrate more on that area, because when you concentrate on a particular area, you have to continue and do additional research. You have to keep up with the jurisprudence from the local courts, from the Supreme Court, and I am happy that I did that, because I'm seeing the need for it, and more I'm being approached with by families who need my assistance and need my services to have their problems resolved. But I've resolved a number of those cases.
Okay, and then I know you mentioned too that basically some challenges people face is on the part of notaries being unable to adequately conduct division of property. So with that, is it possible? I'm just curious if it's possible if an entity could be established just for that, or would it be redundant?
Entity?
Yes.
No. Most of the notary offices, actually that's their task. But most of them have decided, and if you visit the office, you will see a sign that they are not doing any more divisions of land. So persons are, because of the complications, and sometimes the notary cannot. For instance, if you have a person, one heir, that is living someplace in India or Sri Lanka, and lost contact with the rest of the family, they know this person left to go to England. After England, he went to India, and after that, they don't know where he went. Then the notary is stuck there and cannot go any further. So then it still has to go via the courts, and the courts have the possibilities now by law to resolve the issue, although all of the heirs cannot be found. But you have to be able to justify it and prove to the court that you make all efforts to do that, and the person cannot be located. Then the court can make a ruling. Sometimes they would appoint an office or an accountant, or if it pertains to the sale of the property, that the money for that particular heir will be placed in escrow, for instance.
Gotcha.
So in the event the person show up, or an heir of that person show up, their portion of the money will be there in escrow.
Okay. And that goes into the prescriptive rights that you speak of.
That goes into prescriptive rights, but also division of property, because if all the heirs decide they want to sell the property, and one heir cannot be found, then what I just mentioned would be a way to resolve that by creating an escrow account, or appointing a lawyer at an office or an accountant as the curator, so to speak, for this particular person.
Gotcha. Okay. So among other things, like education, I know also you have been quite adamant as far as electoral reform and constitutional affairs, you could say. I saw a piece that you wrote, I think back in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Yeah, 2019. About basically introducing the possibility for there to be for the possibility of electing a prime minister.
Oh, yeah.
So how does this improve the trias politica structure on St. Maarten? And I guess in such a case, the prime minister elect would be the formateur and appoint, select his or her own cabinet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me just say, I'm not for electoral reform. I hear a lot of people running with that and saying we need electoral reform. I don't think that is the problem, or that will solve the issues that we have. That particular article that you refer to, that was as a result of the phenomenon of government falling every year or every 8 months, and a number of persons were looking and making proposals how to resolve that, and they are looking to change the law and say you can't do this and you can't do that. But to me, that is not the correct way to go, because once you are elected as a politician, you have that right to represent the people. Then you should not be restricted by a law saying you can't do this or you can't say this or you can't go there. And that is the free mandate that we have in our system. My proposal is that we elect the Prime Minister. That way, the government, you can only send home the government by the entire government, including the Prime Minister, through an impeachment procedure, which, as you know, is a very cumbersome procedure. So that would mean that the Prime Minister has to be misfunctioning or dysfunctional, and then you undertake a number of steps to remove the Prime Minister. We have a parliamentary system, so Parliament always have the right to send home a member of the government, a minister, if that minister no longer enjoys the confidence of the Parliament. And in the proposal that I made, that would not result in the entire cabinet being sent home, and there would be less need for the cabinet to dissolve Parliament and call new elections. Because if a minister or two ministers are sent home, the Prime Minister has the authority and the competence to replace those. Of course, it's politics, so of course in consultation with the party and the majority in Parliament. But that will give more continuity in government, and not, that every minute, if there's a conflict between a minister and Parliament, that Parliament votes a motion of no confidence, and then the other ministers can say, well, okay, I take this personally, so I'm going to resign too, or they send home the whole Parliament and call new election.
Yeah.
So the Prime Minister is the main person, and that person is elected. I heard some people say we should elect all the ministers. You cannot do that.
I don't think that makes sense.
Because then you can't govern.
Yeah.
Because every minister will tell Parliament, I am elected by the people. You cannot tell me what to do, or you cannot do me anything. But if we do it only with the Prime Minister, and give the Prime Minister more authority, more legitimacy to represent the people, and have the authority to select the cabinet. And yes, there might be ministers that make mistakes, are not functioning, then Parliament has to correct that, and then the minister will appoint a new person.
I'm glad that you said that, because something you mentioned, you used a perfect word in your article, was the case of basically because of that fear factor of ministers being sent home, besides maybe undue pressure on them, you can also get a case of ministers underperforming.
Yeah.
And I think that is an angle that is so important, because with that you definitely guarantee stability, and then definitely also curbs the matter of ship jumping. Yes, because then you have that the executive branch will have its independence. Party members in Parliament, you want to leave your party, that's cool. Go right ahead. No one is stopping you.
Yeah.
But you won't throw down, you won't throw down the government. So if you have this a real true ideological difference with your party or disagreements, that's fine.
You're free to leave.
Because the system will still function.
Continue.
Yeah. And that is so crucial.
We have a dual system, meaning that yes, Parliament has a number of authorities to control the government and make sure that the government functions properly. But the government, the Council of Ministers, has to be seen as an independent organ with their responsibilities, and Parliament as another organ with its responsibilities. And both of them have to keep each other in balance.
Line, yep.
And there is where we go back to the trias politica, where you have the three organs in government, the Council of Ministers, Parliament, and then the judicial system, which have to keep the whole system in balance so that no one institution can override the other or can do things that are not correct, and the other have to sit by and allow it. So the three of them have to keep each other in balance. But during those talks, I heard a lot of people saying, Parliament is the boss of the ministers, and Parliament is the one who appoints the ministers. And that is not correct, because nowhere in the Constitution says that, and at no moment, in no meeting in Parliament, you will see where Parliament
is vetting a minister,
appointing a minister.
Yeah, that is with the.
It doesn't happen like that. Yes, politically, behind closed doors, they discuss who they would accept, who they want, who they propose, and so. But it's not so that they select and appoint who would be minister. So, in my proposal, I think that would give a better balance also between the powers of the executive branch and the powers of the legislative branch.
Because with that, that increases that direct democracy, because then the people also determine who is its leader.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the idea and principle, not on paper, but in our minds, is that, the highest vote getter would probably most likely be the prime minister. But at the end of the day, you're voting for that person to
That's
be.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always turn out to be that way. By the way, the proposal that I wrote, I spoke to a Dutch constitutional lawyer, and he told me that is a proposal that they should be looking to introduce in the Netherlands as well. Because he said the way how democracy is functioning now in the Netherlands, they need a change. And that is something that they should look at. They have discussed it in the past, I know, but the Netherlands is trenched in tradition. And one of the trends of thought, in my view, is that we should stop just copying everything as it is in the Netherlands.
Correct.
Or how they do it.
Correct.
Because they do it, their society is completely different. They have different institutions. They have a different history. They have a different mentality, a different makeup. And for instance, with the balance of powers, in the Netherlands, the Council of Ministers makes the laws. We have taken that over. But according to me, that doesn't function well in our system. Parliament is the organ that should make and establish the laws, and then the Council of Ministers execute the laws. And then Parliament has to control if the government, if the Council of Ministers is executing the laws in a proper fashion. And I think if we start working toward, those are the type of reforms that I would suggest. I'm working out, I'm doing research. I am busy with, and I've said this a number of times, I'm busy with a thesis or dissertation. Unfortunately, I'm not writing and moving along as fast as I should. Some friends of mine recently give me a choke and say, hey, do something, get going. But these are things that I think we should change, and this will also improve the functioning of our democracy.
I see. And hence why I get why you say that electoral reform not necessarily is the way, because we got to approach it on a deeper level. And I think what would definitely assist with that is finally, even with Parliament having its own legislative team, because they, as you stated, they very much depend on the legal department in the executive branch.
Which department should be at Parliament?
Yeah, yeah,
simple as that.
I mean, yes, government should have its legal mind, but then
They
it's
have
kind
the
of
legal advisors, but
right shoe on the left foot.
yeah.
Yeah.
The department with the jurists and the lawyers who write the laws should be at Parliament.
Mm-hmm. And even what you said about dualism is so important too, because even that, while it's not necessarily on paper, and you can't control what people do, it is being blurred. Just recently, at least I've seen on 2 occasions where a minister and a parliamentarian is basically on radio together, and that is where. So it's like where's that divide?
The division. Yeah.
You just can't do it. And so it's like, okay, while it may not be a rule that you cannot, in a sense, appear in a collusion. Collusion is a strong word, but you have to maintain that divide. Simply put, but I think what contributes to that is even a statement the Prime Minister made of the former Chairman of Parliament being the bridge between the two parties. So I guess what we got to work towards is ensuring that every organ functions as it should without muddying the waters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are a small community. We know everyone, and so. But we have to be mindful and particular of certain things. And you create a certain image, and we have to at sometimes avoid that, so that we can guarantee to the people that we are totally objective and not subjective, because this particular one is my friend and I hang out with him, so he is going to influence what I do or what I don't do.
Correct.
And that we have to avoid.
And that is also political maturity.
Yeah.
So even with that, one of the things you stated in your interview, one of your interviews, was that you found, I guess, what is considered the first constitution from 1865.
Yeah.
So what was it like? How do you come across the document, and what contribution this has in particular to sometimes ongoing discussion on decolonization?
Yeah. I have read many references to this document, and some time ago I said, let me start searching the internet for it. It's 1865. There was 2 regulations that were made, because when we were in the colonial period, we had in the Netherlands there was a minister and a ministry for the colonies, and in the colonies you had the governor. So the minister would send directions and instructions to the governor, and they would put them in the form of what they call in Dutch a regeringsreglement. So a government regulation telling the governor what should be done and what should not be done and how it should be done, and then the governor had to execute it. And in this particular one from 1865, I would see the constitutional lawyers, and I would mention, for instance, Arian van Rijn and other professor from Groningen, Hogers. They would always refer to this. So I started to search for it, and then I end up in the National Archives, and I found it. One was issued that year for Suriname, and one was issued for Curacao and the dependencies. But what is interested in that is that you get a picture. If you look at our constitution now, there is, I think, 2 or 3 articles pertaining to the function of the governor. In that document that I'm talking about from 1865, I think there are about 40 or 50 articles pertaining to the governor. So that shows how much power and authority the governor had during the time that we were a colony. And that has changed. There was, if that is considered the first constitution, I think the next major change was made in 1936 in our constitution. Then there was another change in 48 and 50, and then 55 with the Kingdom Charter, the statute. And if you look at the development from then to now, I come to the conclusion and I say, no, you cannot still say that we are a colony because of what happened in 1955 in the United Nations. I agree full-heartedly that something was not 100% how it should have gone in that decision with the acceptance of the statute, because first it was rejected by the United Nations, and then Suriname and the Netherlands Antilles sent a letter and said, no, we agree with it, we accept it. And then after it was brought back and there was a vote, there were some countries against, but the majority accepted it. So because of that, I don't think that you can make the argument. And I look legally at what is considered to be a colony. And the interesting thing with this document, because one of my arguments is that people always question also if we can call ourselves a country or not. And I can refer to the Montevideo Treaty that stipulates the requirements to be a country. And we meet all those requirements. We are not a sovereign country because we agree not to become sovereign, but to form part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And the Kingdom of the Netherlands is the sovereign entity. I hear a lot of people say the Netherlands is a sovereign entity. No, the Netherlands is a constitutional state, or a constituent state. Let me use the correct terminology. A constituent state, just like St. Maarten, Aruba, and Curacao.
Of the kingdom.
Of the kingdom.
But I guess there's still an imbalance, and I think that is where
there is an imbalance. Yes.
Because I get what you're saying. You coming from a legal standpoint, but then the reality doesn't confirm St. Maarten not being a colony.
The reality. Let me say this. There is an imbalance, just as there was an imbalance in the Netherlands Antilles between Curacao and the rest of the island. There's an imbalance. We also sometimes call it the democratic deficit.
Yes.
And yes, one of the areas that I'm going to make proposal also is the higher supervision. Because of that, I think a lot of people say, no, we're still a colony. We are living in a modern age, and I full-heartedly agree that those higher supervision articles should be removed from the charter. But because they are there, does not make us a colony. We have our own government, we have our own parliament, we have our own advice. And if I go back to the Montevideo Treaty, one of the requirements is that you have a government, a stable government. You have a country, a landmass. You have a people. The government has the authority to enter into agreements with other countries. And we meet all of those. Some people say, foreign affairs is a competence of the kingdom. Yes, that is so. But each of the countries have the authority to sign agreements with third independent countries. And the interesting thing with the document that I just referred to, that was given to us in that document in 1865. It was in the hands of the governor, and then it had to be approved by the Minister of Colonial Affairs. But already from that time, we had the opportunity that we can sign, let's say, St. Maarten right now can sign an agreement or treaty with France or with Germany, with the US, and that treaty would be solely between St. Maarten and that particular country, and that is regulated in the statute, in the charter. We make use of it, but it's not well known, and I happen to know that there are a number of treaties that are being negotiated for St. Maarten in the area of aviation, economic affairs, taxes, and so forth. So I don't know of any colony that can do that. So that's why I maintain we are not
I guess
a colony.
that's in the well, we literally only have 2 minutes left.
We have 2 minutes. Oh,
so I mean, so that's another debate. But I guess looking at it is like probably not in a colony in the traditional sense of how it was, but like for example, there's a current proposal now with the coho, and you see that the limiting of powers in a sense, and how that could kind of basically be seen as the new or shadow government. I think all of that kind of makes it all the more
that is
proof
true.
that.
But if I may interrupt you,
Mm-hmm.
If you look at, let's say, African countries, independent, they were colonies. Let's say those that were under France, they're independent today. If you look at their relationship with France act with them as if they are still colonies.
Yeah, that's
so
neocolonialism.
That's a mindset of the colonizer. And I see the same thing with the Netherlands in their handling with us. And recently I was thinking about this coho in Article 73 of the UN Charter. There are instructions as to what the colonizer should do to improve the economy and the well-being of the former colonies. And I was thinking, I said, this issue with the coho looks something like that they have decided, okay, we are going to make some major investment and assist the countries to improve their economy, improve their education, improve their social structures and so. And I think it's a good thing. And maybe the way how they attempted to go about it was not really the right way, but then there have been discussions. I understand there have been changes made, but it's a mindset that European countries have. And we should not take the mindset that we are colonized, or we are still colonized, or we are being recolonized. We should move away from that. And as I said in another interview, we should act as if we are not a colony. If we think we are a colony,
so be independent
we will act
thinking
that way, and we'll be treated that way. But if we do not think that way, we will not act that way, and we will not be treated that way.
Yeah.
So I think that is the message I want to bring or send to the people, that we have to mature, we have to rise to the occasion, we have to educate ourselves. I think education we didn't get the opportunity to go into that, but education is very, very essential, and I think we need to make more efforts in the area of education to educate our people.
Yeah. All right. I appreciate you coming to the program. Definitely wanted to get in more with you. But I guess I will just state that I guess what we have to definitely look for is how it will be translated. I fully understand what you're saying in terms of reshaping our mindset, emancipate ourselves from, mental slavery indeed. But it's to still see how the dotted line and execution of what is proposed will translate, whether or not it will indeed lift St. Martin out of the situation it's in now.
That is in now.
But with that, thank you again, and look forward to having you again, because, again, there was some stuff that I definitely wanted to touch on, like education as well, and more on improving our constitutional status. So with that, to our listeners and viewers, thank you guys, and be sure to tune in again tomorrow. Take care.